What's the difference between a Greyfriar, a Blackfriar, a Whitefriar, a Bluefriar, and a chicken friar? If St. Francis talked to birds, did the birds talk back? And if so, what did they say? And why didn't they talk to St. Dominic? The Franciscans had run the Inquisition instead of the Dominicans. Would it have been a kinder, gentler Inquisition? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I'm Professor Jerome Arkenberg, and I've been teaching a wide variety of history courses at colleges across this country for the past 30 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about heresy and the rise of the friars, St. Francis of Assisi and the Franciscans, St. Dominic and the Dominicans, Tertiaries and Mystics, and the Beghards. At the end, I'll have the wrap-up quote on this video. But first, make sure to click like, share, and subscribe, and that little bell thingy, so I can continue to bring you more great videos just like this one. As urbanization and literacy grew with the commercial revolution of the High Middle Ages, and a newly literate group of artisans and merchants began to read the Bible, leading to the rise of heresy, the friars appeared to bring them back into the fold, even if the popes, the bishops, the secular and the regular clergy did nothing to address the corruption which had led to the rise of heresy to begin with. The first friar was Francis of Assisi, who was born in 1181 and died in 1226, who, after living a pampered life as a son of a silk merchant who had loved being in France so much that he named his son after the country. Yes, because up to this point, the name Francis was incredibly unusual. Anyway, in 1204, Frankie had a vision. Renounced all his property, as seen here, and began a life of apostolic poverty and preaching, acquiring a reputation for holiness, along with followers. And, of course, throughout history, no matter where or when, if you lived a lifestyle, the Playboy lifestyle of, let's say, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, virtually nobody will ever consider that holy. If, however, you live a life of extreme austerity, giving up all pleasures of the flesh, all pleasures of being alive, not just for day after day, but week after week, month after month, year after year, virtually everybody, doesn't matter where or when or what religion, will consider you holy. Now, many of the heretics, like Peter Waldo, who had come before Francis, had preached a similar message and had lived a similar lifestyle. However, when the local bishop told Waldo or the other heretics to shut up and stop preaching, Waldo and the rest refused to do so, saying they were on a mission from God. But when they told Francis to do so, he did shut up. And eventually in 1210, his new order was recognized by Pope Innocent III. Of course, he and his followers were immediately popular, as they did live this life of apostolic poverty, the one described in the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles. They would beg for their food, travel from one place to another, find bedding wherever they found it, whether inside a nice house, in a barn, or just out in the field. And Francis in particular preached sermons more learned than most priests, in fact, more learned than most bishops, which rather ticked the priests and bishops off because Frankie was pretty much showing them up. Anyway, Frankie's sermons drew on not just a deep knowledge of the Bible, but also a deep knowledge of the writings of the doctors and fathers of the church. On the streets, in the marketplaces, in churches and cathedrals, the friars preached that salvation was not just for cloistered monks, nuns, virgins, and mystics, but for everyone. Because up to this point, the church was saying only monks, nuns, virgins, and mystics could go straight to heaven. Everyone else was either going to hell or be spending a lot of time in purgatory. But Francis and his other friars start to preach, if you live this holy lifestyle, you too can get to heaven without having to wait in purgatory. And soon, Franciscans were founded in all of Europe's cities. By 1220, Frankie, considered a living saint, was forced to write a rule for them to follow. But tired of the work required to organize and run his order, he wasn't really an administrator, he withdrew from leadership, received the stigmata in 1224, and died in 1226, but then was very quickly canonized in 1228. Around the same time that St. Frankie had received his vision, in 1205, Dominic Guzman, born 1170 and died in 1221, an Austin canon at Osma Cathedral in Spain, while on a journey to France, ran across the Albigensians, and inspired to bring them back to the fold, to reclaim these heretics for the church, set up a religious community in their heart of their belief area, Toulouse, in 1214, governed by his own rule, the rule of St. Dom. This was a mixture of the rule of St. Augustine and the constitutions of Premontre. And in 1215, his order was approved by the Bishop of Toulouse. His Dominicans, or Blackfriars, were not just to preach the gospel in an intelligent, learned way, but also were to specifically combat heresy, and doing both with deep dedication to learning, contemplation, meditation, and prayer. After St. Dom's death, seen here, the following century saw the Dominican order spread across Europe, with missions sent to Eastern Europe and Byzantium, Africa, India, and China, preaching to all classes while fighting paganism, heresy, and schism. And in 1252, they were put in charge of the Inquisition. Other orders of friars include the Crutched Friars, the Mercedarians, the Minims, the Servites, the Brothers of Penance, sometimes known as the Bluefriars, the Carmelites, usually known as the Whitefriars in England, and the Trinitarians. All of the different orders of friars also had associated with them tertiaries, men and women who were attracted to the way of life of the friars, but who were unable or unwilling, sometimes for family obligations, to live and take the vows of extreme poverty and celibacy. But still, they were attracted to the lifestyle. So they would follow the friars' fashion and simplicity. They would fast. They would abstain from sex and all pleasures. They would be very humble. They would engage in self-denial and especially practice charity, caring for the poor, the lepers, and the outcasts of medieval urban society, while also following the Lectio Divina and the canonical hours. Some of these friars might also be mystics, who might engage in various acts of self-mortification, such as fasting, self-flagellation, the wearing of hair shirts of belts of thorns 24/7 for years at a stretch, though few engage in what I call spiritual aerobics, much as their female counterparts did. Exactly why is a great matter of debate among historians. Another aspect who sometimes lived like friars were the Beghards. Most of the Beghards lived communally like monks, but some preferred to live like the friars. They did not take religious vows, and their rule varied from one community to another, which is why some could live as friars and some could live as monks. They were subject only to their own leader, whom they elected. They could enter and leave their community as they pleased, and while they lived in apostolic poverty, they did care for the poor. The church was very anxious and worried about this, because they existed outside the control of the church. Were they heretics or just do-gooders? The Beghards lived communally, holding all property in common, or, in the case of Beghards friars, refusing to own or hold any property whatsoever. And many of these Beghards were former guildsmen or merchants who had outlived friends and family, were alien or unable to live alone, and again were often thought heretics by a church uncomfortable with communities of holy men not subject to their control. Some of these went on and became friars or monks, and some even later go on to become acclaimed as saints, but some were condemned as heretics and were burned at the stake. The wrap-up quote. I found their friars of all the four orders, preaching to the people for a profit to themselves, explaining the gospel just as they liked. To get clothes for themselves, they construed it as they would. Many of these master friars may dress as they will, for money and their preaching both go together. And now parsons have perceived that they must share with friars. The beneficed ones preach and the friars defame. The friars find them at fault as folk bear witness, but either despises other till they be both beggars. William Langland, 1370. Let me know what you think of this quote in the comments section below. Also, what you liked about this video and what other historical topics or subjects you'd like to see in future videos. Be sure to hit like, share, and subscribe, as it will help me bring you more great videos. And click on that little bell thingy so you know when the next History Waits for No One video is posted. If you want to know more, there are recommended studies on this topic in the description below, along with other ways to connect with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.